the union address. But the Mizamrim didn't want to take the case. Okay. Oh, I think we lost. Um, I think we lost from David. We'll wait a second for him to join us again. So yesterday we learned about two important sugyas. One sugya we learned about was Hamakbia Metzia Lachavere Kadachadere. And the Gemara wanted to at first bring a raya that Hamakbia Metzia Lachavere Kadachadere from our Mishnah, where in the case of Shnei Moedim, when they're both Moedim, the halacha is Yachleiku, and the Chiddush of that halacha in the Mishnah was that each person, even though they're picking up the beged for themselves, they're also picking it up for their chaver. So you see that Hamakbiyah Metzia L'Chaver Kol Chaver. Rabbah deflected that raya, and Rabbah said that in our Mishnah it's different. You're being koined for yourself. So if you're being koined for yourself, that's why you can be koined for your chaver. There's no problem of a makam shechav lacherim by being koined this mitzia. You're hurting other people who would have otherwise wanted to get it, because you're being koined for yourself. But if you were only picking up a mitzia for somebody else and you were not planning to take an interest in it, there we don't see so that's one shot that we discussed that will come into play again today. The other thing that we discussed was if Roichev is a good kinyan, or if Roichev b'makam manding is a good kinyan. And if you remember, we brought a raya from a case of kalai behema, when someone's riding in a wagon that's being pulled by kalai behema, by chamor b'shor yachtav, where it says le'sachsam b'shor b'chamor yachtav. If someone's sitting on the wagon while it's moving, we had a machloikis between Reb Meir and the Rabbanon, which Shmuel flipped around our version of the Brisa to say that it's the Chachamim who hold that it's putter. In other words, sitting on a wagon that's being pulled by a pair of animals that are not a pair, that's going to be putter. And Reb Meir holds your chayiv. So from the fact that the Chachamim say riding on a wagon is not considered riding a wagon, or it's not considered that you're working two animals together that are klayim, we would have arrived from there that Roichev is not koine. So that was the shayla we have, whether Roichev is koine or not. And right now, where we left off yesterday, the assumption is that the Chachamim hold Roichev wouldn't be koine because it's part of implying, and Rameir's Roichev would be koine. Well, thank you very much, Mati. I was here early today. I was here at 5 o'clock because I thought it was 6 o'clock. I'm so famished that I jumped out of bed thinking that I was late. And I get here, and there's not a clue here. I log in to the Zoom. No one's here. What's going on? Then they see that it was 5 o'clock. I'm not sure what's worse, getting up late or getting up early. And then my wife sends me a text. Where are you? I said, I'm in shul. She says, what for? I said, yeah, I know. I'm not famished. You know you're here early when the only person in shul when you arrive is Moshe.
Even wasn't there.
Even Mitzvah wasn't there. Yeah, when I pulled up, I didn't see the car. I was like, what's going on? There's not a car in the parking lot. I didn't hop till I logged into Zoom and I see it's only 5 o'clock. Oh, man. Okay, what can you do? I'll have to make up for that hour over Shabbos. Okay, so that's where we're holding. We're holding where, at this point, the Chachamim hold Roichev is not koine. Reb Meir holds Roichev is koine, but they don't express the halacha about Roichev in a real case of someone riding an animal. The halacha is expressed in the case of someone who's Yosy on the wagon. Now, Yosy on the wagon, I think we will both agree, is less rechiva than riding a horse directly. But we are equating the two in our sugya, and we're saying that if the Rabbanan hold riding a wagon that's being towed by klai behema, you're not chai for klayim, then it wouldn't be a kinyan of Roichev either. So that was one thing we discussed. Another discussion was they're both going to come into play once again today. So we are up to, at the bottom of Daf Ches Omid Beis, there's a dot about 8 lines up, Meisvei. Zakt Gemara Meisvei. The Gemara asks a kasha from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says, and or even Echad Roichev, Echad Manik, Our Mishnah says there's a kinyan. So let's think about it. Elamer of Meir, who holds that if you're Yosef on the wagon, you're chayiv. Why would I need this Mishnah to tell me this halacha that Roichev is koine? Because that's really the only chiddush of the Mishnah. If you remember, when we were trying to bring a riot, we were trying to look for an extra clause in the Mishnah to pull out of there that a Magbiya Metzia l'chaver koine chaveroi. One of the attempts was that the Mishnah said an extra case of how Yushnayim Rechav l'chaver behema. The Gemara asked on Chesam and Aleph Hasulamali. So the Gemara said, "Oh, from that Mishnah Yisera, it must be a Magbiya Metzia l'chaver koine chaveroi." So the Gemara, no, that clause of the Mishnah is giving us a very important message. Hakamash Malonda Roichev Nami Kani. But the problem is, why would the Tanna go out of his way in this Mishnah of Shnai Moichim, which has nothing to do with the Kinyan of Rechiva, to tell us that Roichev is Kaina? The mayor already told that to us in the fact that he paskin by Kalayim, that's sitting on the wagon that's being pulled by Kalayim is Chayiv. So Zok Gemara, Metzia Yishnayim Rechiva Gabe Behema Mani, Ilemer Meir, if we're going according to Meir, why would we need that Kiddush in our Mishnah? Hashtu Yosef Kani. If sitting on a wagon is considered moving those animals, and it's going to be you get malchus for Klayim, so we stretch that into saying from there you see that Rechav is Kaina, Rachav Liboy, which is even more directly pushing the animal. So surely that should be Chayiv, and it should be a Kinyan. So why would our Mishnah need to tell us that? Reb Meir has quite clearly already articulated his position in the Brisa or in the Mishnah that talks about Klayim. Elalav Rabbanan, you're forced to say that our Mishnah is going according to the Rabbanan. And even though sitting on a wagon does not constitute working those animals, and you won't get malchus for Klayim, still Roichev will be Kaina. Ushmamina, Rachav Kani. So you have a Klor Raya that everybody holds Roichev is Kaina. We were trying to make a Raya from the Rabbanan, which Roichev is not Kaina, right? From the fact that Shmuel flipped it around and made the Rabbanan hold your potter, it's a right to Roichev is not Kaina. But our Mishnah has to be going according to the Rabbanan, and our Mishnah says quite clearly that Rachav is Kani. So Gemara, Hachav Avaya Askinon, B'manding Baraglav. We're not speaking about a standard case of Roichev when you're sitting and riding an animal. We're talking about a case where you're much more involved in your riding. While you're riding it, you're I think it's called stirrups, those things that go by your leg, they squeeze the animal's sides, so you're actually forcing it to walk. That's mamish like a mashicha, because you're literally banging the animal to tell it to go. And that's the roichiv that our Mishnah is referring to. But a regular roichiv merely riding on an animal would not be a kinyan. In fact, Gemara, the Mishnah says mading is kind of when you're pulling the animal. What's the difference if you're pulling it by its reins or if you're kicking it on its side? Either way, you're prompting its movement. So avada, it would be considered a kinyan. Why does the Mishnah need to tell us a different version of mading? So tomorrow, because straight avnu mading, mount tema rachav adif the magid the toughest part. The Mishnah wants to tell us a special chiddush. There's two types of mading. There's the mading where you're pulling it on a rope, and there's a mading where you're sitting on it and kicking it. Logic would dictate that the mading of roichiv is better because not only are you making it go, you're sitting on it and grabbing onto it. That's a greater display of bailus, and therefore a greater display of a muhsin. So I would have thought if it's echad rochav echad mading, I would have thought that maybe it's the rochav that's really the muhsik on it. Thomas Bakamash no. It's a different version of mading, and it has no more power than mading does. The Tosfos talks about the relationship here because everything's a little bit of fuzzy. Our Mishnah technically is not talking about kinyan at all. Our Mishnah is talking about who's the muhsik, right? If you're roichav or you're muhsik, how the kinyan actually happened is not. We don't even know, right? But the Gemara is equating the three things: roichav being kaina. It's compared to if roichav is considered a muhsik, and there is a relation because it's a display of bailus that creates the kinyan. And sitting on the wagon, if you're chayav climb, there's no kinyan happening there at all, right? But we're bringing a raya from there. The Tosfos talks about there's a loose relationship. I mean, it's not so loose, but there's definitely a relationship between the three because either one is showing ownership and you're making it move. Okay, that takes us to the end of that sugya. And really, I should have finished this yesterday, but we had a clock. Excuse me, that shouldn't be blowing my nose on the video, but I'm sorry. Gezakt the Gemara weiter. So we're still going to be clearing, bringing rayas whether or not there's a kinyan rechav manik. So let's see what the halacha is. Tashma, shnayim mishayu moishchin begamol. Two people that were pulling a camel, umanhigan bechamor. And Rashi tells us they both mean leading. However, the word normally used to describe leading a gamal is moishach. I guess you have to pull it. It's not as eager to walk on its own. And by a chamor, you're just mounting it, you're guiding it. But normally that's the word used for gamal is moishach. The word used for chamor is mounting. Oishoya echad moishach the echad mounting. One person was being moishach and one was being mounting. Whether right now we'll assume it's whether it's on the gamal or on the chamor. So even though Mashiach is really custom designed for the gamal, and Hanhaga is custom designed for the Chamor, what if you had two people on the Gamal, one doing Mashiach, one doing Manik, or on the Chamor, one doing Mashiach, one doing Manik? That would also be a good kinyan. B'midah zois kani. This way it's kind of. What is this b'midah zois? So that the Gemara is going to make a lot of hay out of that. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, la'olam lo'ikana ad shetehei Mashiach b'Gamal v'Hanhaga b'Chamor. So we already have a clue of what we're talking about here. The Rebbe says you can't mix and match. Meshicha works only by a gamal. Hanaga only works by a chamor. So if there were two people, one was making Meshicha on the gamal, and one was making Hanaga on the gamal, the guy making the Hanaga would have zero kinyan on it. So that's how they argue with Rabban. So now let's be medayik from this mission. Katani miyas. Oy shoya echad moishech ve'echad manik. It's machma that these are the only two ways that someone could be coin an animal. Moishech umanik in avol rachav loy. So we have a raya that roichev is not a kinyan. Zok Gemara, we can deflect that quite easily from our brayso that we just quoted. You cannot make such a diak. Hu adin dafilu rachav. Even rachav would have been a kinyan. So why didn't the brayso list that off as well as an option? The hadik atani moishech umanik. After those two options is lafukim and Rabbi Yehuda, because the Tanakama, their main point is not to list, give an exhaustive list of all the way you can be quite things. They're just discussing, will Meshicha work for a Chamor and will Hanhaga work for a Gamal, and they were just trying to make that point. It doesn't matter. Either way will work. And that's the focus. And we're not mixing Roichev in here because that's not the point of this conversation. Frank the Gemara, if according to the Tanakama, Meshicha and Hanhaga works both by a Chamor and a Gamal, the Brisa separates them. Why didn't they just say one big told? And that would cover the Chachamim Shita that you could do Hanhaga on a Gamal and it'll work. You could do Mashicha on the Chamor and it'll work. So Gemara, because it doesn't work both ways. Only one way works. Iga chatzad the loikani. One way wouldn't work. Which way doesn't work? Iga dami Mashicha b'Chamor. The Chachamim are saying that if you did on the Haga on the Gamal, it would work. You'd be kind of the Gamal. But if you did Mashicha on the Chamor, it would not work. Because the army on the Haga b'Gamal. So the reason why I didn't blend it all together is because Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama's position are not so far apart. Rabbi Yehuda says Hanhaga only works by a Gamal and not by a Chamor. Mashiach only works by the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda says Hanhaga only works by a Chamor and not by a Gamal, and Mashiach only works by a Gamal, not by a Chamor. Your bundle, Hanhaga might work by a Gamal, but Mashiach wouldn't work for a Chamor, or vice versa. That also explains the Midah Zois Kanu, because there is some specificity. Is that the right word? There is some of that. There's some of that. What? Because one way doesn't work. The Ikadamri, there is the most of Miseifa. There are those who brought a raya to the opposite perspective from the Seifa. So in this first lashon, we tried to bring a raya that Roichav is not kind. Now we're going to try to bring a raya Roichav is kind. The Midazu Kana, which is the second, which is the end of the words of the Tanakama. The Midazu Lamutamai. Obviously, the Midazu is telling you that Dafka, this specific case is kind of, but there's going to be a case that's not going to work. What is that case? My lab Lamutarachim. So you have a raya Roichav is not kind of. Oh no, I'm sorry. So it's the same raya. We're bringing out our raya that Rechem is not koina, but focusing on the different word of the Tanakama. So the same thing. Is the Amri Meshicha B'Chamor V'Ikdamri Hadhaga B'Gamo. So at the end of the day, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it only works in that specific way. Meshicha B'Gamo and Hadhaga B'Chamor. According to Rabbanon, one of the two, either Hadhaga or Meshicha, works on both animals, but one of the two only works by one of the animals. But we don't know which one because there's a discussion about it. Zok Tahelaga Gemara Vayter Tashma Echad Rachov Chamor, the echad tafus b'moiseir. One person is riding on the camel, and the other one is holding its reins. We're not walking here. We're not walking over here. Let's have a look. Echad tafus b'moiseir as Rashi's ve'enei manik. He's not leading it. He's just holding on to the moiseira. So the halacha is zeh kana chamor. The person sitting on the animal, being reichev the chamor, is kana the chamor. Zeh kana moiseira, and he gets the strap. Okay, Shemamina, you see from here, Rachav Kani, because I get to keep the animal. As Rashi says, Rachav Kani, Shaloi b'makamanik, when there's no manik here. Because we were saying the fellow who's holding the Meisera was not being a manik. If it was Reichav and manik together, and we say he's kaina, that tells you that Reichav is so strong that you can be kaina by riding an animal, even though someone's leading it. But here, the cases where the guy was not leading it, he was just holding on to the rein. So at least you see that Reichav is kaina when there is no manik here. V'chivon the shaloi b'makamadik kani kulei. Since shaloi b'makamadik, he's kaina the whole animal with a rechiva. The logic would dictate that b'makamadik palgi. If there was another claim, another kinyan on this animal, another muksuk on this animal happening, because someone was being manik it would not diminish the validity of the rechiva. So at least he would be entitled to have. But in this particular case, there was no muksik on the animal, there was only a muksik on the rein. Zok Gemara, you don't have a raya from here. Your reichav is kaina. I can deflect this the same way I deflected the Mishnah. Hachanami b'manik b'raglo. It's speaking where he's making it move, giving it a kick. And that's why he's kaina. But maybe reichav alone would not be a kinyan. Frank the Gemara, ihachi, and this ihachi is I don't believe it's ihachi if he's kainit. Rashi ihachi have a much lakshu migufa. The katani aisha echad moishech echad manik shemami na the bechad tzat kani. No, I'm sorry. That's weiter. I apologize. That is weiter. So ihachi nikni nami rachav b'maisera. If you're going to tell me that when I'm riding that animal, it makes a kinyan, and I'm being manik baraglo, meaning I'm moving it. So through the animal, I'm also making a mashicha on the reins because I'm moving the animal, which is connected to the reins. So why don't we say that the rider should also have some kinyan in the reins? Granted, the person holding the reins has nothing on the animal, but the person riding the animal who's moving the animal should have some type of claim. Should have some type of claim on the reins, as Rashi says. The reins are connected to the head of the chamor. So let him be kind of the Meseira. Zok, you have a very good point. In fact, he's kind of half of the reins because he's also, by making the animal move, that's creating a kinyan on the Meseira as well. And the person holding the reins only gets half of it. For Gemara, that would not work either. I understand the guy who's riding the animal will have a claim, a kinyan. The kamag v'loy bendas. He has a kinyan on the reins. Why? Because he's picking up his half through riding the animal, and who's holding the other half of the rein? The person who's holding it. So there's a bendas holding it. So we'll say that and they can both have a kinyan. And the toughest b'maisera b'maikani. The fellow who's holding the reins, how is he kinyan? The other end is being held up by behema. So how would it work? As Rashi says, "Al toughest b'maisera, how are you kinda paga? How is he even kinda half?" The other end is sitting on the chamor. You have to pick the whole thing up. The other half you're not picking up. It's like it's sitting on the stick. You haven't lifted it up.
I'm picking up a set after. like this, like the
That's a very, very important point because Tosfos makes a distinction. If the animal wasn't there, would the other end be on the floor, or would the other end still be hanging in there? So that's a very good point. So Tosfos says, of course, this means that if it wasn't for the fact that it was on the animal, it would actually be lying on the floor. Because if it would be hanging in there because it's high enough, that would be a good kinyan anyway. So it's a very important distinction, and it's an important Tosfos because not only do we have the Tosfos here, we had the same Tosfos in Bava Kama. Dr. Gemara, Ema. So let's change the psak again, and let's say Zek Hana Chamor the Kula Maisera. Let's say that the person on the Chamor, he is going to the whole Maisera because he got his half through his Meshicha, so to speak, and he's got the other half because there's a Bendas holding up the other end. The Zek Hani Mashutapas Biyadai. And this guy holding the reins is only kind of what's actually in his hands, but he's not kind of the whole Maisera. Correct the Gemara, as we looked yesterday. If that guy's not kind of, you can't be kind of either. Hi, my. If you hold a Magbi Mitzil Chaver, then it might work. But when will it work? The guy lifting it up has a zinin to be kind for you. The guy holding the Meseira is not doing it for the guy sitting on the behema. He's doing it for himself. He's picking it up for himself. And you know what? He's not even kind of. Right? He only kind much of the other. He wasn't even kind to himself because it's not a good kinyan. Because the other half is still on the chamar, lachrini makni. So his kinyan is not going to work for himself on the Meseira, but he's going to be able to do it. This is even worse. You don't have not only don't you have a miga zachal nafsh zachal on the chavre, you have a miga delay zachal nafsh. It's worse than Magbi Mitzil Chaver because he's not even being kind for himself. Hi, Ma'izak Rashi. The Kabbalah Takbal type is from Meseira. Lehav Akbal in the day. Akbal lachrini doesn't make any sense. Over Ravashi, you're right. We'll revamp our psak again. The fellow sitting on the chamar is kind of the chamar, and the part of the rein that's directly on the animal. I guess it's like a leather mask that's on the animal. That there's a ring connected to it that connects to the reins. So he's not kind of the strap of the reins, just the part of it that's directly on the animal. Does anybody have an article? How does he actually translate base pagel? The headstone.
Oh.
Stall.
Whatever.
How do you spell stall? Head stall. So I guess that's the part of the rein that's directly on his face. And the other one, the person holding the rein, will only be kind of what's in his hand because his kidney isn't good either. Vashar, whatever's in between the two, loy kada, loy zev, loy zeh. And Dr. Rashi, if somebody else wants to get involved in this Purim play, this will make a perfect incident play, right? Okay, so let's finish the daf. Rabbi Vo Omar, today I started on time. I actually have a chance of finishing the daf. I don't want to lose this one. Rabbi Vo Omar, no, let's go back to the original shot that the person holding the Meseira is kind of the whole Meseira, and the person on the donkey owns the donkey. But what was our problem? Our problem was the guy holding the Meseira, the other half of it is on the behemoth, and that behemoth can't contribute to his kinyan. Dr. Gemara, there's a difference here. The yochel and natka ulavia etzlai. This Meseira isn't so strongly adhered to the animal. He can just give it a yank. When he gives it a yank, then he'll be lifting up the whole thing. So the chiddush here is a very big chiddush. He didn't give it the yank. He could give it the yank, but he didn't. But since he could give it to yank, we look at it as if he's holding the whole thing, and he will be kind of. And that's a very, very big chiddush, to the point that the Gemara says, or Bedusehi. Rabbi Vo's teretz is not valid. We've had different shatim if it means nonsense, if it means if it's a joke, but it's definitely not valid. I guess we could say that the Lublin strikes again, so why is that? If you're going to tell me that since I could yank it, even though I haven't yanked it yet, it's as if I have the whole thing in my hand. So then let me ask you this question. Talis shehi mudachas chetzia al gabe karka v'chetz al gabe om. What happens if there's a talis that's hanging on an oven, and I go pick up the other end? So I'm going to be kind of, maybe. And then uba achar negbiya chetzia al gabe karka. One took the half that was hanging down. Uva achar, the second guy, went and took the other end off of the post. According to what you're saying, the second guy should have no claim. Because the moment the first guy picked it up, even though the other half was on the stick, since he could have given it a yank, he's cutting it against it, and the second guy has no claim at all. So are you telling me, Hakanami the Kamakani Uvashra Lakani, of course not. So let me stop for a second. Not. You're telling me, are you going to tell me that the first guy's going to cut, the second guy not? Yeah, maybe. How would you know opposite? What? Why doesn't it make sense?
Why shouldn't he be kind of just because he has?
Because I was cutting already. The moment I picked it up, even though the other end was on the stick, I was cutting the whole thing already because I could have yanked it. So why did the Gemara assume it's nonsense? And Tosfos look at Tosfos. The Eloi Temach Italis Echetzik Sas Kosta. Minole Shlo Yachlei Kerbavo Afazeh. Maybe that does argue. You're making an assumption. Maybe Rebbe argues on that assumption. This is the first time I ever saw where Tosfos has a kasha, and he doesn't even mention that Rashi deals with this and explains it fully. Usually it appears for Kundrish, but I still think it's fair. But Rashi is a very perfect shot. So let's look at Rashi. Hachanami the Kamakani, the Mechi Agba Kana Kula. According to Bava, the guy who picked up the beged from the bottom, so now it's in his hand and leaning on the stick on the other side. He's cutting it because he can really pull it to himself. Imkain, and this is how we have a right. Our Mishnah says that if two people picked it up together, you say achloik. And our Mishnah says it as a blanket statement. Zokt Rashi, Zami Khan, Zami Khan. The difference would be between Makam Gavay and Makam Namach. If the other end was in a high place, you wouldn't say achloik. But if they both picked it up from a low place, then you would say achloik. The first guy's Akbar would not be kind to everything, because you can't just pull it and it'll be in the air. Since it's long, if he pulls it, it's not going to come to him, it's just going to drag, the other end is going to drag along the floor. However, if the other end was on a high post, well, then the Magbi Tchila, Rosh Gabi would be kind of cool. But we've never seen a Tana that makes that distinction. So Tosfos says maybe he argues. Rashi saying if he argued, you would have found at least one Tana that makes that distinction. I guess Tosfos' opinion is even if you don't find any Tana that makes that distinction, maybe Rebbe Vo does.
It should be mamish off the ground or three tfuchim off the ground. What?
I think it just has to be suspended. I don't think it has to be 3 tfuchim off the ground.
So, by a talis, you can just flip it in the air like this.
That's a very good question. Tosfos discussed that also. How about flipping it up? What if the Gemara discussed? What if I go? Someone's holding something in his hand. They knock his hand up. They flip it up, and then it falls right back down. Is that called Agba? So Tosfos makes a distinction. If I stop knocking out of his hand and it falls down, that might not be Agba. But if it shoots up first and then goes down, that could be different. So that's what the Tosfos discusses, the different things that would be Agba versus those that would not. So it's a very important point. And there's a lot of different nuances that make a difference in what the halacha would be. Tashma, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Rachav b'sada umanik be'ir. If you're riding an animal in the field, that's a kinyan. If you're leading an animal be'ir, it's a kinyan. However, if you're riding an animal in the city, that won't be a kinyan. Why in the world would that be? The Gemara is going to explain. So again, manik will work bein b'sada, bein be'ir, but Rachav would only work in the sada. Riding an animal in the city wouldn't work. So Gemara Rachav b'sada umanik be'ir kana. So we have a Meforsha Bryce that says Rachav is kaina. So you have a Rachav is kaina. So Gemara Hachanami manik baraglav. Maybe the Rachav b'sada that we're talking about is the same thing. The manik baraglav. Isn't that the same thing as manik? Trey Gavni Manik. There's two types of manik. They both work with each other's manik. But this type of manik that's called roichev, that type of manik will not work in the city. It will only work in the field. Frank the Gemara. If roichev is considered manik, so why does Rabbi Eliezer say that the kinyan of roichev does not work in the city? People don't go horseback riding down Bathurst Street. But on a ranch, that's when they're going to go horseback riding. So since it's not the derech to ride an animal be'ir, therefore it's not a good kinyan. Effectively, that makes no sense at all. I want to do it. That's a kinyan. They're RCMP were on horses. No, the reason why the RCMP came on horses yesterday is because they wanted the pro-Palestinian supporters to feel like there's, the police force, they try to be multicultural. They have like having Indians on the police force, so everyone feels they're represented. So the Palestinians felt not represented, so they had to bring horses there because then they feel they're also represented. So I think that's why they brought them. If someone picked up a wallet on Shabbos, it's not the derech to pick up a wallet on Shabbos. It's muksa. Are you going to tell me hachanami delay kani? Are you going to say that it's not going to be koina? Avada would be koina. You're still manifesting. You're still displaying an ownership, and avada would be koina. What you see from here is a beautiful thing. You see from here that you don't look at how the Welt does a kinyan. You look at how Yidden do a kinyan, because otherwise, just because Jews don't pick up a nine on Shabbos, the Welt does pick up a nine on Shabbos. So you see that when we're assessing whether that's a kinyan, that has to be the derech to do for a Yid. Ella, what are you going to say? My David, yeah, he did an Aveir. But the Kani, he's still Kaina. Hakanami, my David, the Kani. So how can you say it's not Kaina? So we're going to get back to here in a second, but let's just finish this line. Ella b'mekach memkarskinan. Really, Avada, you'd be Kaina. You'd be Kaina if you're Reich of Be'ir, even though it's not the derech, you did it. But here it's being on Mekach memkar, and the seller put a t'nai in the sale. The Amr Lei Kni Kederech Shebnei Adam Kain. The Moicha said, I'm only letting you buy this from me if you make a regular type of kinyan, a conventional kinyan. But if you're going to do some weird thing, then I'm not being mocked at you. So technically, Avada you'd be Kain. It's not a kinyan shaila. It's just a shaila in the condition of the transaction. What? It's teaching us that that's not the derech. But you have a good heart. So let's. I just want to stop and analyze two things. Everybody knows there's a famous story where two chassidim were talking about the greatness of their Rebbe. So one said over, "Oi, my Rebbe is so holy. He was once walking in the desert, and there was a big mountain in his way, and he was trying to get by, and to walk around the mountain would have made it such a long trip. So he said, Bar Gahin, Bar Geher, the mountain split, and it created a path, and he walked right through it. The other who said that's kunished. My Rebbe was walking, and he had to cross a river. And again, how is he going to get across a river? So he said, Vasarahin, Vasarahed. He mamish made a kriyas yamsuf, and he walked right through. So the third chus said, my Rebbe is much bigger than you. He was walking down the street, and he saw $100 bill, and he said, and it was on Shabbos. So how is he going to pick it up? So he said, Shabbos ahin, Shabbos ahed, and he picked it right up. So that was the biggest ma'ibus of them all. So that's what this Arniki b'Shabbos. Maybe the case was where he said Shabbos ahin, Shabbos aher. But I'm only saying this because we're already in Chodesh Adar. But on another note, we have a rule called milsa the Amar Achman loy sapit I avid lamani. Well, there's a machlokes if he avid mahani or not. So the question is, why would this be a kinyan on Shabbos? You're not allowed to pick up a wallet on Shabbos, and there's even a shaila that applies to an issue to Rabbana because there's only muksa. So I was like, why doesn't this shaila involve the question of kol milsa the Amar Achman loy sapit I avid mahani or not?
We have to come on to the Isra of touching the Arniki. And make a kinyan on Shabbos.
Okay, I got excited with the money. So that is the shaila. So the Chorayim answer very posh. That we have a rule called milsa the Amar Achman loy the avid mahani or not. That's if the etzem zach that you're doing is also. For instance, a kohen being mekadosh a gerusha. It's also to be mekadosh a gerusha. There's no isser in making a kinyan. The problem is the timing isn't right. On Shabbos you're not allowed to do it. There you don't say Avid Mahani because the action itself is a proper action. It's only because of the time that it's usher to do it now. Okay, so the Gemara says it's speaking by Mekach HaMemkar, and therefore it was a Tanai in the Mechir. And Doli pointed out quite good. Why do I need the Brisa to tell me a halacha that if a person makes a Tanai, the Tanai is valid, right? Zok the Gemara the Iver Shus Harabim, but if it's in the Rishus Harabim where it's normal. I'm sorry. The Irish Harabim, if it's Irish Harabim, who kani? It will be kani. So let's look at Rashi. The Irish Harabim kani, even be'ir. You know why? The derech lirkav sham. In that we said that you're not koina because it's not the derech, that's only in a regular place, in a simta. But in the Rishus HaRabim, you would be koina. Why? Because in the Rishus HaRabim, the derech is not to lead your animal, the derech would be to ride your animal. And why is that? The derech, lirkayv sham v'loy lahanik. Why? Pen yifsiku oivri derachim beinoy levein behemta. We're afraid someone's going to get in between him and his behemah. He's afraid, and then his behemah got lost in the crowd. So therefore, he wants to ride it. So there it would be normal, and there would be a kinyan, which opens up a whole new question: is don't we hold that the definition of a kinyan mashicha is when you're slapping it into your rishus? So how will mashicha work in the rishus harabim? So there are those who bring a raya from this gemara that when it comes to balei chayim, you could even be kinyan with mashicha in the rishus harabim, because that's what the gemara is saying over here. So that's a good question, because Tosfos actually discusses a regular manik. You're making a walk. I think you have to up 2 feet have to take a step. But by the roichav manik, Tosfos says it's a little bit less movement. Tosfos actually discusses that over here on Daf Chesam and Beis. Tosfos says over here, the Oslo Nami Ma'at Makmosei. The roichav that's moving, it's moving a little bit. But manik is the Gemara Shah. The manik should be better. Is by manik the Oslo Makmosei Tuva. So by manik, we're making it go further than we are by roichav. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Baita. The Adam Chashav will come, and if he's an Adam Chashav, a Rosh Yeshiva is not going to lead an animal around. The Rosh Yeshiva is always going to sit on top of the animal. So that's also called the derech. The Ishahi, if it's a woman, also called you, because it's a derech for a woman to ride an animal, not to lead an animal around. The Inazilahu, and if he's Tamak Bahema, who doesn't conform to the norms of the world, and he does things that are inappropriate for him that's appropriate. The Inazilahu, he's also going to be kind of. So the only person for whom it's not the derech, and it wouldn't be kind of because it's not making the tanai that it has to be kederech, is a normal person who would normally not be riding an animal over here. Okay, boyer b'loser, and maybe that's what the chiddush is, even though it doesn't say farish, right? Boyer b'loser. What if someone tells his friend, "Mishoich behemazu liknois kelim shalel"? I'm not giving you the animal. The animal is mine, but you're buying kelim from me, so I'll put the kelim on my animal, make a mashicha on the animal, and through making a mashicha on the animal, will that be considered a mashicha on the kelim, so that you can be kind of the kelim? But you're not kind of my animal. Tosfos says very clearly, I'm not giving you my animal. So Mao, correct Gemara. What do you mean liknois? The wording that the fellow said, that the moicher said, was "Mishoich b'emzu liknois." Pull it to be kinda, meaning you want to be kinda. How could that work if I didn't tell you I want to be makna to you? Me amar like kni. The whole shiloh doesn't make sense unless it's speaking where the moicher actually said out the word kni. So Dr. Okay, we'll revise our shiloh. And the Mishoich b'emzu ukni kelim sha'alah. Well, the fact that you made a mashiach on the animal, will that be a kinyan for the kelim or not? Amar Rav said, hold on a minute. Before you discuss a question of whether or not I'm kind of the kelim, when I'm not being kind of the animal, but the fact that you asked that question, you obviously hold that, let's say I was being back to you the animal and the kelim at the same time, there you tell me for sure would be good. Because you're only clearing in the case where I'm not giving you the animal. It's a mashma that you hold if I was giving you the animals, for sure it would work. But that's not true. Amar Rava, Amar like kni bema ukni kelim. Be kind of kelim, you wouldn't be kind of the kelim anyway. Because how would it work there? You'll be kind of the animal, and then the animal will become your chutzner, and now the kelim are going to be nickness to you through your kinyan chutzner because it's sitting on your animal. But this is not a good kinyan chutzner because chutzner malachasi. It's a mobile chutzner, it's an animal. The chutzner malachas loikana. So by the way you're asking your shaila, it seems like you're sure that if I was being back to the animal with the kelim, it would work. But there's a huge problem; it really wouldn't work. And if you're going to say that first you made a mashiach on the animal, you're kind of the animal, then the animal will remain stationary, and then secondary, now that the animal is stationary, it'll become your chatzah to become the kelim. But that won't work either, because this is a very famous Rava that's quoted all over Shas. Everywhere in Shas, the Gemara says, "Amar Rava, coach ilu mahalach lekana, I mean lekana." Here it doesn't say Amar Rava, it just says V'hakol. You know why? Because this is where Rava said it. All over Shas, but the Gemara says Amar Rava is referring to this case. I didn't know that. Rashi tells us that. So Rashi is the famous Amar Rava. Where is it? Here's the famous Amar Rava on Bava Metzia, Daf Tesamet Beis. V'hilchaza, halacha l'maisa, v'kvusa. We're actually talking about a kvusa. The animal is tied up and it's no longer moving. That's where the assumption is that it can be used as a chotzer and the person will be called to the kalim. But our shaila still remains, will the Mashiach on the animal itself be considered the Mashiach on the kalim, and will it work? So Tosha speaks on something very important. What if the kalim were in a box and you made Mashiach on the box? There for sure you're called to the kalim. So why is a behemoth any different than a box? So Tosha says very simply, because kalim belong in the box. So there's a natural connection between the kalim and the box. So it's normal that you'll have kalim in a container, but kalim don't have any specific connection to an animal. So therefore, making the Mashiach on the animal might not be considered a Mashiach for kalim. But that's if you're not selling the animal. When you are selling the animal, if it's going to be a kvusa, it would work through a kinyan chatzar. So based on what you're telling me is that since it's a chatzar mahaleches, it can't be kaina. Well, if that's the case, what if you're sitting on the ship? The kavtu dogim the naflu l'soichasvin, and fish jumped in to the boat on their own. Hachanami the chatzar mahaleches beloy kani. Are you going to say that anybody can come into the boat and take your fish away? Because yeah, I came into your chatzar, your little ship, but at the end of the day, the ship was moving. Amalei, no, that's not considered a chatzar malachas. You know why it's not considered a chatzar malachas? Because we say the svina meinich naicha. We say the svina is not moving; it's stationary. Umayu the kamavdala. The water is pushing it around, but the svina is considered a stationary platform. We hopefully we'll have time to do tosfos on this because this is something that needs a lot more explanation. I'm sorry. Okay, we're talking about a woman walking in Rishus Harabim. So there's no chatzar that belongs to her that will be able to accept the get. The get was thrown onto her person, either her purse or her basket, but something that she's holding on her person. Based on what you're saying, that's going to be a chatzar malachas. Are you telling me that the get wouldn't work? We know it does work. He answered, the basket is stationary on her body. She's the one who's moving around underneath the basket. The basket itself is stationary. This needs a lot of explanation, but I want to finish the daf and then we'll go to Tosfos and we'll see the Rebbe Kiva Eger on it. Someone who's riding a behemoth, and he saw a Metzia. Now he doesn't want to get off his horse to pick up the Metzia. He told his friend, sorry? Very good. He didn't want to get off his high horse. He told his chaver, Yankel, do me a favor, that Rolex there, today, give it to me. Notla, Yankel picks up the Rolex, and he had in mind, of course, to be kinded on behalf of the rider. But before he gave it to the rider, he told the rider, sorry, I decided that I won it. So the Allah is Zachaba, he gets to keep it. The Gemara is going to bring a raya from here that I'm Magbi Metzia Chaver like Kana Chavera. Because if he originally picked it up for his Chaver, he can't say now Zachaba. That's what the Gemara is going to ask. Maybe he never had in mind. Right, but that's what the habit of the Gemara is going to be that it's assumed that he did pick it up for Yether, and now he's changing his mind. So you'd have a raya that Magbi Metzia Chaver like Kana Chavera. And as Mati deflected, the Gemara is going to deflect. Who said? Maybe when he said, I took it for myself, it means I never had a mind to pick it up for you. I always meant to pick it up for myself. That's exactly what the Gemara is going to answer. But what if he already gave it to the guy? He gave it to the rider, and then Yankov says, it's mine. And these are they're lawyer club. And Rashkas Mabonish. Let's say he was Takakot first. But the fact that he gave it to the rider, he's a matana. He gave it to him already. Sorry? No, but I would say Devarim Shabbalai made him Devarim. You asked me to pick it up for you. I picked it up and gave it to you. How could I say that action would constitute a pekod? Right? The passions of the situation is that, and even if I'm not kinder, because I was trying to be kinder for him, nevertheless it would be hefker until he got it. So Dr. Martinez, we learned a very interesting brisa. Misha liket esa peya. Someone was picking peya. And Rashi tells us this is not someone picking peya in his own field, because you cannot pick peya from your own field, but he was picking peya from another field. The Omar, and he said, Harezu leploidi on. I'm giving this to ploidi on. Before I start the sugya, I just want to share with you a machloikis, and I want to keep that in the back of our mind because I want to see if anybody will notice a raya from our sugya to one side of the machloikis. What if someone says, when I buy that watch, I'm going to give it to tzedakah? So it's a davar shaloi b'loim. We didn't buy it yet. So, Pashas, if you buy it, it's not tzedakah, because when you made that promise, you didn't own it yet, right? But the Rambam holds, it's not automatically tzedakah because it's a davar shaloi b'loim. But we look at it like you made a nether. And to fulfill your nether, or it's a shvua, to fulfill your commitment, you now have to give it. So even though the transaction that you try to make doesn't work because it was another shleim b'laylam, but you did make a commitment to give it, so when you buy, you'll have to give it. And the other Rishonim said, no, you don't have to give it. What you attempted to do was to create the chalois now, to be marked as something now that you don't own yet. It doesn't work, and that's it. When you buy it, you can keep it. So the question is there a secondary factor that I made a nether? That's the discussion. The Rishonim hold not, the Rambam holds yes. So let's keep that in mind. Let's discuss.
The nether is even a word.
Well, it was a promise. It was a promise that has teeth. It's probably a shvur, because nether is always making something usher. So it probably is a shvur. That's probably what it means. Tanan also, Misha Likin is a payah. Someone took payah again. He took it from somebody else's property because you're never allowed to take payah from your own property. And he said, he wanted to be kind of this on behalf of Ploini Ani. He wasn't picking it up for himself. He was being a Magbiyah Metzia l'chaverei. So the halacha of Eliezer Omer Zachaloi, the Ani is kind of. We're going to bring a right for you that Magbiyah Metzia l'chaverei. The Chamaimim Yitnena la'Ani adim serishon. He has to give it to the first Ani that he encounters. Now the Gemara is going to end up saying that this is speaking, or this might be speaking, not by an usher who picked it up. It's actually speaking by an Ani who picked it up. So the question is, if an Ani picked it up and it doesn't work, let him keep it. So the Ktsois HaChoshen brings a raya from this Gemara to the Rambam. The fact that I can't keep it myself is a raya that I made a nether, I made a commitment, so I have to give it to a different Ani. Because otherwise, let me keep it myself. So that's the point that I wanted to bring out. It's a often a raya. Because if there's a commitment to give it away, then it makes sense why he didn't learn the Rishon. But if there's no commitment and what I said didn't work, so let me keep it. Amar Ula said, Amar B'Shua Levi, this whole discussion is if an usher came and picked it up, who doesn't have rights to this payoff. The Rabbi Eliezer Savar, you know Rabbi Eliezer holds it works. How can I make such a kinyan? I have no right to pick it up myself. Because he holds Migodi Boy Mafker Nichse. Any rich person could be Mafker all of his Nechasim. Now he will be eligible to collect the payoff. V'hava Ani, he'll be an Ani. V'chazli, and then he would be able to take the payoff. So therefore, Hashanami Chazli, we say now he can also be kind of the payoff. But that's how he could be kind. How could he be kind for somebody else? So we're literally combining two migois to make this work. And that's what the Eliezer holds, and it works. If he was kind for himself, we would let him be kind because of the migo. But trey migoi, to combine two migois, lo yamid, because he's an usher. But what if it's my ani lani? My ani lani divrei akoyel zachaboy, because everybody holds migu de zachi l'nafshei zachi dami lechavei. Since he could have picked it up for himself, he's picking it up for somebody else. So this is not the migu de zachi l'nafshei that Rabbi used to deflect the raya, because this is literally a Metzia l'chaverei, because he's not being kinded at all. It's saying since he could have been kinded for himself, therefore he can be kinded completely for somebody else. In our mission, the Migu Zachi was, since I'm actually being kinded half of it for myself, I can be kinded the other half for somebody else, right? But this is regular case of a Metzia l'chaverei, because I'm not taking anything for myself. I'm being kinded completely for the other guy. Amalei Rav Nachman Lula. V'lei b'mar, why don't you say that even may ani loni machlokes? Because the Metzia hakol ani metzla. A Metzia, which is our Mishnah, everyone's an ani. In other words, everybody has a right to collect the Metzia. Utnan, and our Mishnah says, Hayorecha v'gavi behema, v'rasa Metzia, this Mishnah we just learned, v'omer l'chaverei, todayly, not law, he took it, v'omer aniza chisiba, zachaba. How can he be zoiched? He already picked it up on behalf of the rider. If you're going to say that, and there's a shita who holds that even by Anilani it doesn't work. Even by Anilani it doesn't work. That would explain why he gets to keep it. Masnisin Bani Rabbanani. The Mishnah will go according to the Rabbanon who say that the kinyan doesn't work. Right? Rabbi Elazar holds the kinyan would work and it would go to him. Rabbi Elazar would hold, but the Rabbanon holds loy kana chaveri, and that would explain our Mishnah why when the guy says I want to keep it now I get to keep it, even though I already picked it up on behalf of the rider. But if you're saying the machlekes is by Ashavani, the question is, can you have a double migui? But by Ani, everybody holds I can pick it up for the other guy. This won't fit inside according to the because they're both going to agree that by Ani will be a good kinyan. It's a mamish case of Metzia Chaveroi, Kana Chaveroi, and our Mishnah says like Kana Chaveroi. That's why the guy was able to keep it. Amalei, Mati's answer. Mastisha number tchila. The Mishnah is not a case of Metzia Chaveroi. When the guy said that I took it for myself, he didn't say I'm changing my mind now after I was cutting it for you and I want to keep it for myself. What he's saying is I never had in mind to give it to you. When I picked up that watch, I always wanted to keep it for myself. So our Mishnah has nothing to do with the shaila have a Metzia Chaveroi, Kana Chaveroi or not. It's logical without this kasha to say that that's pshat in our Mishnah. Because think about it. The Katani Seifa, the Seifa says, in the second case, he already gave it to him, right? And he spoke out that I was cutting it before. Why did the Mishnah have to speak out when the guy gave it over? There he said that I had originally picked it up for myself. Pshita. It has to be that that's what his claim is. Because he's not holding it anymore. If he already gave it over, and then he says, I picked it up for me, it's too late, the guy has it. So he must have meant that when I originally picked it up, I had in mind to pick it up for me. That has to be the case. Yet the Mishnah speaks out that he said tchila. It's pashut that he spoke out tchila. It must be that the reason why the Tana stuck tchila in the second case was to tell us that the first case is also speaking about tchila. So you might ask me, why didn't he put tchila in the first case? Kasha. But at least the Tana put tchila in to tell us that the whole Mishnah is speaking about tchila, and therefore it has nothing to do with Metzia Chaveroi. Because the guy's claiming I picked it up for myself all along. What about the tzad that we did bring the raya? So the sefer l'gloi reisha. Sefer number tchila, the dafka the sefer you said tchila, and that's why the Tana puts it there in the sefer. But he wanted to make a point that the reisha is the loyer tchila, and therefore it would be relying on the halacha of Metzia Chaveroi, Kana Chaveroi. Okay, Gavalta will stop here. Mitchell will continue here on Shabbos. What?
We're all done.
I'm also going to be. Yeah, because my brother makes Shabbos Shabbos.
Get to the masses of the